An epiphany has actually many meanings. Today we celebrate feast day of the Epiphany, Jesus revealing himself to the nations. And that is manifested in these, what we call the Magi. Sometimes we call them the three kings or the three wise men. We don't know that. That's just tradition. But we know they're from the East, and so we get the term magic from the Magi. And they brought three gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh, representing his divinity, his kingship, and his sacrifice. But the word epiphany, broken up, means like to shine a light on, to realize something. Something is made manifest. And when you have an epiphany, that means you realize something about the world, about yourself, about the church. Sometimes it's an epiphany about something glorious, and sometimes it's an epiphany about something that's difficult. Either way, it's an epiphany, and it's always good because it's a revealing of a truth. It's a good thing, even though sometimes it may be a hard thing. We all experience epiphanies at different times in our life. A few years ago, about once a year, I go to the prison in Gatesville and say Mass for the men there. We have people here that's their ministry, jail ministry, prison ministry. And I enjoy it. Before I say Mass for the men, I'll hear their confessions, and they put me in a little closet, and they'll come in their little white jumpers and make their confession. Whether they're Catholic or not, they want to go to confession. But one particular time, a man who was about my age, actually exactly my age, walked into the room, and we were kind of staring at each other because we recognized each other. We went to high school together. We actually graduated together. Now, as he left, he asked me, please don't tell everybody that you saw me, especially back at home. So we'll just call him Willie. And then when he walked in, I said, Willie? And he said, John. And we realized that we hadn't seen each other since the day we graduated. And so I said to him, Willie, what happened to you, and what are you doing here? And so he shared a little bit about what had happened or how we got there. But again, we hadn't seen each other since the day we graduated, so he looked at me with my collar and said the same thing. What happened to you, and what are you doing here? And the epiphany that day was God is at work, and we had a couple of epiphanies we hadn't kept up. We didn't know each other as well as we thought we did, and God was working in our lives in different ways. But in that sacrament, in that moment, many things came to light for him and for me. Healing and mission and all of that. The epiphany we recognize today is the one experienced by the Magi, symbolized in these three men here. We don't know a whole lot about them. There's a legend about what their names are: Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. But we can say we do know some things. That they were not Jewish. They were not part of the chosen people, the Israelites. They were from the East. They would be considered pagans. They would be considered Gentiles. And I think at somewhere in their life, they said to themselves, what are we doing here? Because they were men of science, we know that. They were men of honor. And they knew enough about the Jewish prophecies that in their own science, whatever their academics were, they knew something was happening over there. As they were watching the stars, they were astronomers. And they probably said to each other, what are we doing here? We need to be over there. Because that's where the action is. Something divine is happening west of us. And something drew them to west of them from the east. And we hear today they showed up in Jerusalem, however long that took them to get there. And they said, where is the new king. And I imagine the scribes and the Pharisees, when these guys showed up, they said the same thing that Willie asked me. What are you doing here? What are y'all doing here? And they shared, well, we know the prophecies. Where is the newborn king? Where is the newborn son? Where is the Messiah? And the scribes and Pharisees seem to know what we hear in Micah, that no, the Messiah will come from Bethlehem. That you need to go, it's in Bethlehem. Now I imagine these wise men showed their wisdom and probably asked them, if that's the case, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? You're faithful Jews. Shouldn't you be in Bethlehem? And they probably had an epiphany. You guys are not that faithful. To your own faith, you're not that faithful. And when they made their way, however long that took, to Bethlehem and found the Holy Family with Christ and knocked at the door of the tent, whatever was there, I imagine the Holy Family said the same thing. Mary and Joseph looked at these three guys from the east and said, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And we don't know if they spoke the same language, but all we know is they pulled out their gifts for the little one. And traditionally, the theologians in the church will say that gold, frankincense, and myrrh were actually wedding gifts. They're recognizing there was a wedding, a marriage between God and man taking place in that manger. And that they knew who they were. And the epiphany for Mary and Joseph is, wow, these men know who we are. These men know who he is. And the word is out. The word is out. Everything is becoming clear. And as they prostrated themselves before Jesus and did him homage, and with their gifts, they realized the word is out, but also it came with a message. It also came in a dream to all of them that you need to get out of here because Herod is after the baby. And I imagine the epiphany that happened to them then, even though this is glorious, amazing, God among us, that this is not going to be easy. This is going to be hard. We're going to have to get out of here. And part of their ministry in protecting the Lord and Joseph's ministry was sacrifice. This is going to be hard. This is going to be dangerous. That was part of the epiphany. That we're not just going to be living on a beach, sipping margaritas and speaking French with 2% body fat. That this is going to be a mission. This was their mission. And this was all being revealed in this mystery of the Magi with their gifts. So I would say much of our lives as Christians is a series of epiphanies, realizations, things coming to light. Epiphany means to shine a light on. And as Catholics, before we go to confession, oftentimes we have to take that light and look into our hearts and our lives, what needs to be healed, but also what is our mission. Different times in our life, we recognize in an epiphany how amazing and profound the sacraments are. The sacraments of initiation and mission and healing. As a priest, I get to experience this firsthand. Sometimes it's awesome, sometimes it's difficult. In a few weeks, actually, we're taking our young kids on our teenagers to the confirmation retreat. I love the confirmation retreat. I love it. It's fun, it's profound. Oftentimes it's with our young people who never go on retreats, but they come to that because they want to be confirmed. But the first night they get to the confirmation retreat, the first thing we ask them is, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And most of them are honest. My parents are making me come. They're honest. And then they wonder, well, we are adults. What are y'all doing here? And all of that is slowly revealed. And oftentimes, they have an epiphany. Wow, this is real. The sacrament of confirmation is a sacrament of mission, that we're going to come closer to the church. We're supposed to be defenders of the faith, soldiers for Christ. And oftentimes, they embrace it. They get excited about it. And they come out of that retreat ready to receive the sacrament of confirmation. Sometimes they also have an epiphany. Some have an epiphany. It was like, wait, I didn't know this was what this was. I didn't know what I was getting into. You're telling me I'm making promises? I'm coming closer to the church? We're not that Catholic. And I'm not ready and not comfortable for this. Well, they've had an epiphany, a tough one. And we appreciate their honesty. Maybe they're not ready for confirmation. And sometimes their parents have an epiphany. Maybe we haven't instilled the faith in them as much as we should have. Both are true. Both are an epiphany. One's difficult, one is glorious, and it's always good. I also get to go on our marriage encounter or our engaged encounter retreats, where we have a bunch of engaged couples that come together. And all of them, I would say at some point, have an epiphany. An epiphany that's glorious. Wow, this is an amazing sacrament, the sacrament of marriage. They're going to image Christ's love for his church. They're sent on mission as husband and wife to be open to life, to totally sacrifice for each other, to love someone the most. They get excited, they embrace it, and they're ready to get married. Sometimes the opposite happens. Sometimes a couple goes, hey, wait a minute. You know, sometimes even I've heard a groom say, I have to promise God I'll be here for her for the rest of my life. Yeah, that's it, yeah. I don't know if I'm ready for that. And usually we'll tell her, listen to what he's saying. They have an epiphany. Maybe we're not ready for this. Maybe we're rushing into this. Maybe we're not prepared for this. Tough. That's tough. When an engaged couple walks up to the retreat master and says, hey, listen, we're going to go. I don't think this is good for us, and I don't think we're going to do this. And the retreat master says, thank you for your courage, because you just not dodged a bullet, you dodged a cannon. In that epiphany, that difficult one, that epiphany, that realization, it's always good, sometimes difficult. And that happens to all of us in different ways. I think in the story of salvation, especially when Jesus is forming his apostles, we hear the epiphanies of Peter and the rest of the disciples. When they get asked the same question, just like the people on retreat, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? He asked them, who do people say that I am? Matthew 16. Who do people say that I am? And they're excited to answer. Some say the Elijah. Some say the prophet. Some say Moses.